This is Bible Talks. Our purpose is to defend the Bible as the divine revelation of the God of heaven. We believe that it must be studied, understood, believed, and faithfully obeyed. We believe that we must give book, chapter, and verse for all that we do in the name of God's religion. Then and only then can we be pleasing to the God of heaven, His Son Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit who gave us the Bible. Thank you for tuning in this morning.
Welcome back to Bible Talks. My name is Chris Kramer with the Northside Church of Christ in Russellville, Kentucky.
And I am Nick Greenman with Christian Home Church of Christ in Butler County, Kentucky. Good
morning. It's good to be with you, Nick. Looking forward to our study today. And we want to thank all of our listening audience for tuning in this morning, whether it's through WRUS, that's 610 AM radio, which also streams online. You can also hear it on radio stations like TuneIn through your computer. But you can also watch a video format of this lesson simultaneously on the Northside Church of Christ YouTube channel. So if you'll just go to the internet and type in Northside Church of Christ, Russellville, Kentucky, you'll find our website. And that website will have links to our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and then, of course, our email address. And if you'd like to send us a question or a comment regarding our lesson today, please do. Perhaps you'd like to hear a topic in a future study, and we'd be happy to hear from you. We won't be able to answer those questions today, but we'll certainly get to those in a future video. Nick, we're going to begin with about 1 Corinthians chapter 6 today. Our past couple of programs, we have been studying about discipline and withdrawal in the church, and that led into a discussion about making judgments regarding right and wrong. But Paul the Apostle doesn't stop there with the proper way to judge. And though this isn't a continuation of our previous subject, and by the way, I want to apologize, as I did last week, Nick and I had recorded our program, and we ran into some technical difficulties, and so I had to re-record it without him. So it's good to have you back, Nick, and sorry for all that work you did last week. Kind of fell by the wayside there, but we'll pick up with chapter 6 of 1 Corinthians this morning, and we're going to be talking about judging matters against one another. Do we have a matter against our brother, and how do we deal with it? You know, we're all human beings. We make our mistakes, and one thing that we have to understand is though we love each other and we're commanded to love each other, we're commanded to behave, we might say, Christian-like with one another. Every once in a while, there still might be an issue that comes up. There might be a wrong that's done. There might be, I think among most Christians, just words that are said that perhaps hurt one another or hurt one another's feelings. But yet there are also matters that you might say are worthy enough to take before the courts of today. Matters of law, matters of social crime. And Christians are not immune to those things. Though we try to stay away from those kinds of things, we also have to understand if, by chance, we run into those issues among the brethren, how should we deal with them in the church? So what I'd like to do this morning is just go ahead and do a read-through of verses 1 through about 8, and then we'll have some discussion and do some cross-referencing to what the Bible has to say overall about how we deal with this issue. So, Nick, if you want to start us off with reading, we'll just go from there.
All right. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Let's begin. Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world will be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Do you not know that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? If then you have judgments concerning things pertaining to this life, do you appoint those who are least esteemed by the church to judge? I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you, not even one, who will be able to judge between his brethren? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. Now, therefore, it is already an utter failure for you that you go to law against another. Why do you not rather accept wrong? Why do you not rather let yourself be cheated? No, you yourselves do wrong and cheat, and you do these things to your brethren. Pretty strong words that he has. I said he has pretty strong words to the Corinthians there, and bringing them to this particular shame about not being able to judge matters that should be able to be handled amongst themselves, but they want to make a public spectacle of it, bringing reproach against the church.
Yeah, from the very beginning in chapter 1, he pointed out the fact that brethren had to go to him. He says, it's been declared, to me concerning you. And so there are some that were willing to keep whatever problems were happening among some of the brethren, especially things that affect the church. They were willing to, deal with one another in the brotherhood concerning those things. So this is kind of the first look that we have that some of the brethren may be dabbling outside of the church and dragging one another to the courts for whatever reasons. He doesn't get into any specifics that are here. I never always want to assume that just because he addresses an issue or preaches on it, that the brethren have a problem with it. But in this case, his terminology is very strong and very poignant. And so I do believe in this case, he is dealing with some of the brethren that are, he's condemning some of the brethren for their actions here.
And he certainly says, but brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. I mean, that is pretty strong. They don't have confidence in themselves to be able to handle the matter, so they want to go to somebody who is unjust, unrighteous, because anybody who's not in Christ is going to be unjust, unrighteous, and yet they have more confidence in them to be able to settle a dispute between brethren instead of the elders of a congregation or the leaders of the church. And he says, is there not one wise man among you who can handle this?
Yeah, he's not saying that problems won't arise, but that when they do, we have a godly way to fix them. We have a godly way to discuss them. Looking at Corinth as a whole, living in kind of, I'll just use the word metropolis kind of area, kind of gets you into that mode where you're a little separated, I think, sometimes from needing one another as a family. I think a lot of times in smaller communities, churches that are a little more smaller and close-knit are able to work together a little bit better and overcome issues. And we're always going to hurt one another or cause one another pain in some way, but we talk it out. We work on it. We forgive each other and we help each other. But in this particular case, you're looking at such, diversity in this town where you've got all these religious beliefs, you've got all these people behaving in an area of commerce, and really sometimes it's all about, making the next buck. Being successful in your business. And I have no doubt that some of the issues that were probably addressed here probably centered around money and business. I brought a lesson on money the other night from the book of James in our Wednesday night study. But taking matters to worldly courts among brethren, let's just say that there's a time and a place for that. And the reason I want to bring this up is that I do believe there are exceptions. I don't want to take away from anything that Paul is saying here. But what does the Bible teach us regarding going to court and going to the law? Paul's not preaching against law. He's not preaching against courts. He's not preaching against civil obedience. And, and even himself was willing to be subjected to the laws of the land. From time to time, he would call on the fact that he himself was a Roman citizen. And he had certain rights as a Roman citizen, but that was when he was dealing with the sinners of the world. And that's not how he dealt with the church. One of the verses that comes to my mind is Matthew chapter 5 and verse 26. And these are the words of Jesus Christ himself. And it backs up to about verse 25 when he says, agree with your adversary quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge. The judge hand you over to the officer and you be thrown into prison. Surely I say to you, you will by no means get out of there till you have paid the last penny. So there he's talking about, one, don't put yourself in a position where, your adversary your opponent here is, has to do such a thing. Take care of your debts,
Right.
pay your debt to this individual, and do what is right. So Jesus isn't condemning going to law when it comes to these matters or crimes against society. And there are a lot of those things that we probably can't do as Christians. For instance, if one of our brethren, was accused of murder,
Mhm.
that's not an issue that we can try. We do not separate ourselves off as some separate group from the government or anti-government or in a commune or something like that and say, well, we'll handle that matter ourselves. That's a crime against society.
Right.
And
We have
so,
an obligation.
yeah, if anything, we have an obligation to bring the law into that matter. I don't think that's what Paul is talking about
No.
here, because if it were, then, he would address it as such.
It would seem that Paul is addressing more of this unity amongst brethren. If the members of the church can't show a united front, then what message is that giving to the community? Like, this is the Lord's church, and they can't get along with one another. Why would I ever want to be a part of that? And the idea of bringing reproach against the church, you see that time and time again. One of the qualifications of an elder is beyond reproach, right? You got to have a good example in the community to be an elder. And if the elder needs to have a good example in the community, what does that mean about the church? It needs to be a worthy organization. Now, when you look in the Roman time period, there was a lot of times where just the fact that you were a Christian or organized as a church, you were breaking the law, and we have to obey God rather than men. But Paul and Peter, and they all make it very clear, make sure that when you suffer, with persecution or other those things, make sure it's not because you're doing criminal activities. Make sure it is because you're being faithful to God. And so it is very important to remember that. But in this particular case, these brethren are dealing with probably something petty, something they should be able to deal with, something they shouldn't be divided over. And we know that division is a major problem in the church in Corinth. And this is causing that division. And there's no leader stepping up saying, hey, we've got to settle this. We got to figure this out. In one chapter, in chapter 5, they're willing to allow a man to have his father's wife, and they ignore that, and they try to sing kumbaya, I guess. But then in this particular chapter, there's some kind of petty difference, and they're willing to, split the church in half over it.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got their priorities all askew there in Corinth, and Paul is getting on to them about it.
From time to time, and I think Paul dealt with this, like in Ephesus and other places, when they would when the Jews tried to bring him to the Roman courts, sometimes those Roman leaders said, "What do we have to do with your law? Why are you bothering us with this matter?" Is Paul dealing with matters of law here? Perhaps, but I think the word that you've used several times is they're probably dealing with a lot of petty matters as well. But if they are dealing with matters of the gospel of Christ, the law of Christ in that regard, like in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, then they're responsible for that. That's not something that they can take to the local courts to deal with when it comes to matters of what the world would just consider to be morality. We certainly have laws on the books today that protect us from one another regarding our personal protection. For instance, we can't just go up and punch a man. This ain't the old West days. You hit a man,
I don't
chances
know,
are pretty good
Chris,
he's going to take you to the courts.
it does seem like the Wild West sometimes.
It does, but there are consequences, and we do
Right.
have rights in regard to our personal protection. But I also think about the thief on the cross. The thief that sought forgiveness I'll just have to go back to Luke chapter 23 and verse 40 and 41. That can explain it better than I can. But it says, the other answering rebuked him. This is after one of the criminals blasphemed the Lord. And then the other criminal said, do you not even fear God, seeing you're under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. And these men were hanging there till their lives would be taken from them as a matter of having been tried and convicted for whatever crime they may have committed. So what you find, well, we know that they were thieves. But what you find there are those few exceptions that we see in regard to not to contradict what 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 through 8 teaches us, but putting it into perspective that this passage is not a blanket, hey, don't have any dealings with the law. As a church, and we both worship with congregations that you could say they own property. We have a building on that property. We still have to abide by the laws of the land. We have to abide by the regulations when it comes to taxes and when it comes to taking care of our property and making sure that things are safe. The past few months have been a good example of that, and the fact that from time to time, depending on how we handled this crisis, which we're learning more and more about all the time, but at first we didn't know what to do. And if the government stood up and said, look, we can't be having people meeting in the building, well, we respected that. We understood why. It was sensible. They weren't taking away from our religious freedoms. Nobody has ever taken that away from us. Now, if it ever came to the fact that somebody was trying to take away our religious freedom, then, we'd be preaching a different lesson right now. But the point is that we live in a time and in a community. Both you and I, Nick, we're sitting here in the heart of Kentucky, and as much as people might complain about this, that, or the other, you and I have the freedom to be able to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, to gather and to, work with our brethren, to encourage one another, lift one another up. And when trouble happens, we have to study God's word to gain the wisdom to handle those matters among ourselves. And so if it's petty differences, especially if it's matter of doctrine, as we've already seen in this chapter or in this book, if it's a matter of money issues, we can go to our brethren and say, look, we're not here to get into your personal business, but when it comes to offending a fellow brother, let's work these things out. And Jesus set the terms for that. Again, I'm going to go back to a passage that we've studied a few times already, because the subject of judging has come up a lot. That's Matthew chapter 18. And I'm just going to point out this passage that there was no court involved. It was about going to a brother who has sinned, and that is transgression against the law of God. And in Matthew 18:15 through 17, he says, moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you've gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. So there, I found about 6 points that he makes in this passage. Number 1, a brother sins against you. Okay. Number 2, go and tell him alone. This is between you and him. These are matters between individual brethren. If he hears you, you gain him. But number 4, if he does not hear you, then you take with you 1 or 2 more. Now, who are you going to take with you? The police? No, your brethren. Let's say a brother stole from you. I wouldn't show up at a brother's house with the police on each shoulder. I would show up with my brethren and those that are ready to encourage this man in a spiritual sense. And then, if he does not hear, take the matter to the church. And that's where he'll have to be noted publicly, getting back to our previous lessons on discipline and withdrawal. And finally, you basically mark him as a heathen and a tax collector. And then if it comes down to getting your property back or whatever, once that's been enacted and there's nothing more you can do, then you might have to go to law if it's a matter of recovering a property or whatnot. But you've got to exhaust every spiritual opportunity to work with this brother, because as we've preached in our previous lessons, the ultimate lesson is to gain your brother back.
Right.
That's what Jesus is teaching here. He's not just saying go through the steps to get your stuff back. He's saying gain a brother. So it is about love, and it is about understanding, and it's about forgiveness is what it comes down to. Well, let's look at the text a little more closely then, because we have a few minutes left of our program. And what we want to do is look at the passage from, I'm just going to say Paul's attitude toward it. Look at what he says in verse 1. I'm reading from the New King James Version. I believe you are as well, Nick. Mm-hmm. Dare any of you. I just hear a little frustration in him. You know, when do we say words like this? Like, how dare you? Don't you know better? He has higher expectations of these brethren, is I think what he's getting at here. So dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous. So what Paul does throughout the course of the context here is he makes a distinction between your brother and the unrighteous. And you pointed this out earlier, Nick, when it comes to, say, a reputation that you might have in the community. Who are the people that we are trying to bring to the Lord? Well, it's the unrighteous. Right. And if the unrighteous look at the church and say they can't even handle their own business, why would I want to be part of that? Well, they've got a valid point there.
Yeah. I mean, do we not hear that argument all the time? Why would I want to be a part of a church that's full of nothing but hypocrites? I mean, that's an allegation levied against the church almost constantly, if not, every time you ask somebody, why don't you go to church? That's going to be one of the arguments given about 9 times out of 10, I would think, for people who are just not wanting to go.
Let me tell you how I used to answer that. I wouldn't give the person the benefit of the doubt. I used to answer that, well, they're hypocrites at the grocery store. You still go to the grocery store, right? But what I realize, especially now, is that that's not really an appropriate answer. Because, yes, there are hypocrites at the grocery store. And you know what? There are hypocrites in the church buildings. We don't all claim to be perfect. I'm not going to call out brethren and things like that. I just know that there's not a one of us that can meet the standard of perfection of the unrighteous expectation. But I will tell you this. There are no hypocrites in the kingdom of God. There are no hypocrites in the church. You may be wronged from time to time by a brother that makes a mistake. And that's where we have to learn. Why does the Bible teach us so much about forgiveness and understanding? If we were all perfect, we wouldn't need that, would we? So that kind of, it's not a good argument to have, but at the same time, I understand. I understand that people see hypocrisy in people that they expect better from. And you know what? We expect better of ourselves as well.
Amen.
And we're going to talk about that in our next lesson. As you heard our alarm, our time has gotten away from us here this morning. But we do expect to do better. And so we're going to end on that note right here, just so we can make this point, that if we've wronged you, give us a chance to make it right.
Right.
That's the ultimate goal that's here. It's not about going to law and courts and things like that. Let's just sit down and be adults. I witnessed 2 men this past week. One apologized to the other. It was like sometimes, watching children out on the playground. Don't always know what to say. Don't always know what to feel. You just kind of kick in the dirt. One man says, "I'm sorry." And the other man looked at him and said, "I forgive you." And it was a beautiful moment. And we need more moments like that in our lives.
Amen.
We don't have to sit there and make arguments about ourselves or justify what we've done or not done. We do not need to take the old adage, well, he did this or he did that. That's beside the point. We're here to humble ourselves in the sight of God. God isn't going to listen to our tailored argument like a lawyer might give in court. He's just going to see whether or not we're humble enough in our hearts to forgive and repent. Well, that's all the time we have for today. We thank you all for listening this morning. Nick, any quick thoughts before we end?
It's just it's always at the right time to hear these things.
It absolutely is, and we're all affected by them. Worship with us tomorrow with the Northside Church of Christ in Russellville. If you're in the Morgantown area, look up the information for the Christian Home Congregation and go meet with Nick over there. Both of our services, I believe, start about 10 o'clock. So we hope to see you all tomorrow morning, and have a wonderful day ahead.
This has been Bible Talks. It is our prayer that you have been edified and more determined to rightly divide the Word of God. Tune in next Saturday and we will study again.
Praise the Lord.